Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from the Telesur Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. President Vladimir Putin received his Venezuelan counterpart Nicolás Maduro at the Kremlin to discuss the possibility of increased cooperation. Issues of financial cooperation, energy, and technical collaboration in relation to the military were on top of the agenda. Putin reiterated his support to Maduro and slammed foreign interference in Venezuela. The meeting was also attended by senior Russian politicians and the Venezuelan delegation.
We know that the situation in Venezuela remains complicated. We support its efforts.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has said his country is under attack, a situation that has been a steep learning curve for Venezuela.
We have been subjected to multiple aggressions and we have learned from it, as our region has always been treated like this for more than 100 years, and I think we have found the point to move forward.
As President Maduro continues his official visit to Russia, our correspondent Hansel Oro gives us more details on this.
During this visit, bilateral meetings will be held on the outskirts of Moscow between both presidents. The aim is to uphold and explore mutually beneficial trade agreements, especially with the Russian company Gazprom, whilst bolstering military and cultural relations. President Putin has condemned foreign powers in their effort to devitalize Venezuelans such as the United States, but also countries in Latin America. He also hopes that the upcoming elections in Venezuela on the 9th of December run smoothly and peacefully. It's worth remembering that President Maduro was here just over a year ago and called for ditching the dollar. So far, this is all we know and we'll bring you more as we find out.
Venezuela has set its security plan to ensure the elections on Sunday, the 9th of December, as peaceful as possible. The plan will guarantee the security and progress of the municipal elections and all the voting material. The Strategic Operational Commander Remigio Ceballos said that under the plan, people will also be protected from harm's way. More than 20 million people are expected to vote. A Spanish court has ordered the 5 members of the Wolf Pack to 9 years in prison for sexual abuse. All over Spain, demonstrators took to the streets to reject what they say was a far too lenient sentence. The men were accused of assaulting and gang raping an 18-year-old in 2016 during the San Fermin festival. 2 out of 5 judges said the group had to be condemned for sexual aggression and face 14 years in prison.
De 9 años de prisión.
Our correspondent in Spain, Adriana Cardoso, gave us more details about the protests against the sexual abuse sentence of the Wolfpack.
We are standing in front of the Justice Ministry where protesters have gathered, calling for tougher sentences for the so-called Wolf Pack. The 5 men were each handed 9-year prison sentences for sexual abuse, but they were acquitted of the more serious charge of rape. The judges said there was no proof of violence and that it was unclear whether intimidation had taken place due to lack of force used against the 18-year-old victim. Under Spain's current law, an offense can only be classified as rape if there is evidence of violence or intimidation, such as being threatened with a knife or being physically hit. 2 judges on the 5-member, all-male panel disagreed with the decision, saying that the gang had committed rape. They, therefore, urged for tougher sentences. However, all 5 judges agreed that the filming of the attack violated the victim's privacy and ordered the lower court to issue a sentence for the offense. The case and the sentencing has sparked fresh protests, with demands for better justice and an end to what they describe as patriarchal justice.
Now to Colombia, where indigenous communities are demonstrating against human rights abuses and are demanding the government to protect them better. They have decided to take to streets even if that means their closure to raise their voice against the recent murders of indigenous leaders. They want justice and security so they don't live in fear. At least 34 community leaders of the Agua people have been killed.
Aquí hay un abandono y esas necesidades se han convertido en un
and our
problema
needs
serio.
are superiors. Who shows up when we resist? Armed groups. And when we resist to defend our territory and culture is when we are threatened and killed.
This region, especially Ricaurte, Tumaco, and Barbacoas, has a strong presence of armed groups that are operating on the ground. They have threatened us, resulting in the murder of 3 people. Communities are on the streets waiting for the government to solve this.
The Colombian National Electoral Council has said it will investigate Senator Gustavo Petro because of a video scandal. Footage has been released showing Petro receiving money which the senator admitted he received in 2005, but said he did not commit a crime. Petro said the video seeks to end his political career and silence the Odebrecht corruption scandal and investigations in Colombia. And the Colombian long and triple jump athlete Catherine Ibargüen has been chosen as the Athlete of the Year 2018 by the International Association of Athletics Federation. At a ceremony held in Monaco, she became the first South American athlete to win the award. Interviewed after the event, she said she was filled with joy and dedicated the award to her family and country. With this sport news, we take a first break hearing from the South. Make sure you find us on Twitter at Telesur English and my personal account, Laura P. Telesur. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Bolivian Electoral Court has allowed Evo Morales to run for president. Morales can now be elected in his party's primary elections ahead of presidential polls scheduled for 2019. The current president could be re-elected for the 4th time in a row. Bolivian Vice President Álvaro García Linera will also be able to stand on the ticket. Our correspondent Freddy Morales tells us more.
Bolivian President Evo Morales and his Vice President Álvaro García Linera have been enabled by the Supreme Electoral Court to run in primary elections next January 27 and in the general elections on October 2019. The authorization was passed by 4 of the 6 votes from the Electoral Court that has also allowed other 7 political groups to run. This court's decision was taken 2 days before the deadline set by the electoral schedule and surprised a sector of the political opposition that is organizing protests across the country against Morales and Linera's candidacy. The opposition has announced it will continue to protest and will call for a 24-hour strike organized by civic institutions, besides a demonstration in La Paz and also a vigil outside the electoral court. Opposition candidates believe this authorization marks a blow to democracy. Meanwhile, members from Morales' party celebrate their leaders have been allowed by the Electoral Court to participate. They say the Electoral Court has given Bolivia's people the choice on the future government for Bolivia.
And Interpol has decided to reject the red notice for the arrest of a former Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa. According to Interpol, the petition, which was submitted by current Ecuadorian government, did not meet the requirements established by the organization. Correa, who currently lives in Belgium, had argued that the request was for political purposes. Mass layoffs in the public sector of Chile continues, with more than 2,000 workers losing their jobs. Nationwide, public workers have gathered outside the palace waiting answers to what they say is unfair dismissal for a political agenda. Workers say they began being fired with the arrival of President Sebastián Piñera, who has put at risk social programs serving the most vulnerable in society. They also accused authorities of not complying with the agreements reached for the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Labor and Social Welfare.
The same arguments they had in August are being repeated. There's not justification.
They are ignoring the functions we play in the public sector. Many have poor contracts. They are taking away the few rights we have been gaining during this process.
Mexican researchers are interested in the migratory phenomenon that has led thousands to seek asylum at the border of northern Mexico.
Mexican social experts have been researching the Central American exodus for 16 days. After traveling over 4,000 kilometers, migrants established themselves in Tijuana to apply for asylum in the United States.
Why does this number stand out, if in fact it represents a very small fraction of the people who travel through Mexico? I would answer that is because they are visible for the first time.
Researchers are trying to answer questions about the society lived in by the thousands of Central Americans at the border.
There's no proof that crime has risen because of these people. On the contrary, we see that this group has a lot of potential to integrate into this city's productive life.
Analyzing decisions taken before the migratory phenomenon, they are denouncing the lack of planning by the authorities.
A lot of actions are being improvised rather than planned. There is more capacity to house people in the Barretal, but that doesn't mean conditions are more dignified.
The xenophobic behavior expressed by a minority in Tijuana is also being studied. There is a specific cause behind it.
These demonstrations of rejection shows an inability on the part of the government to solve this issue.
Over 5,000 migrants are currently housed in shelters across Tijuana. They left their country seeking a dignified life, and today they have to face the decisions of a frontier government that is just improvising.
And in Mexico, new president has proposed offering more visa works for Central Americans. He also urged the United States to do the same. Andrés Manuel López Obrador proposed investment in job creation aimed at stemming the northward flow of migrants. He was speaking at a press conference where he also read the riot act to foreign and national oil companies. He's challenging them to pump up oil quickly, or he says no further oil fields will be offered. Mexico will establish a National Institute for Indigenous People for the promotion of their rights. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has announced a new law to help indigenous communities. This measure follows López Obrador's campaign promises of supporting indigenous people in the country that still suffer from discrimination and statistically more poverty. In Brazil was born the first baby from a transplanted uterus from a dead person. The healthy baby girl was born in Sao Paulo after her 32-year-old mother received a uterus transplant for a woman who had died from a brain bleed. The mother, who was born without a uterus, underwent a 10-hour operation followed by the fertility treatment. There have been 39 uterus transplants from live donors, but the 10 previous attempts from a dead donor had failed. The family of the slammed Argentine activist Santiago Maldonado has slammed the investigation into this forced disappearance and murder. During an interview, his family stated that the judge was pressured by the government to close the case, adding that they will be appealing to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. The family of the murdered Argentine activist Santiago Maldonado has rejected the judiciary decision to end all investigations regarding his case. Officials said Maldonado drowned, but his family says he was the victim of a forced disappearance. Our correspondent Edgardo Esteban has the details.
The family of Santiago Maldonado gave a press conference alongside human rights organizations and social movements to reject the resolution of Judge Gustavo Yeral, who decided to close the investigations into the case of Santiago Maldonado. Santiago's body was found near Riverbank in October 2017 after he had disappeared for more than 70 days. His mother said the judge is caving to the government's pressure and insisted the family only wants to know the truth about what happened to him.
Still in Argentina, where women are protesting against the court decision on the rape and murder of teenager Lucia Perez. Outrage spread in the country as the three accused were not found guilty on November 28th. The court said their culpability could not be proven despite the fact that they offered drugs to Lucia and took her to their home. Feminist group says this is additional proof of the lack of gender perspective in the judiciary. Earlier, Argentinian journalist and activist Jimena Xinca joined us to talk about this case and also the feminist movements in Latin America and the world.
Ni Una Menos was born in 2015 in Argentina because of another femicide against teenagers named Chiara Paez. And that is the movement is growing around the continent and around the world. And that's why we are thinking that this is not going to stop. It is going to grow no matter if judicial authorities or the government are not taking enough policies to protect women in our countries.
Like this, we've come to a second break here from the South, but stay tuned with us, connecting the Global South.
With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
And we are back. A two-day meeting of BRIC nations has come to a close in South Africa, and they concluded that they must work for multilateralism to counter the far right. They also condemned the trade war by the United States and the constant use of sanctions as political weapons. At the close of this meeting, the former president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, sent a letter in support of initiatives that promote multilateralism. In the letter, Lula wrote, "In 2003, when we created the BRIC group, the world lived for meaningful dialogue and innovation in relations between countries despite the wars and hunger. We hope to build an international order based on multilateralism geared towards peace and progressive movements." 15 years later, we are witnessing setbacks in the world, even if in my country, as you know. The future government has already shown to be an unconditional ally of the United States and a subordinate to Trump. Its purpose in foreign policy is to dismantle everything we built with dialogue and cooperation in the Latin America area with Africa, BRICS group, and international organizations. It is very bad for the world that at this moment a country like Brazil that contributed to multilateralism and peace, we feel ashamed about Bolsonaro's hostility to many institutions and friendly countries. Turkey has issued arrest warrants for two men close to Saudi Crown Prince over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Turkish state media says Ahmad al-Siri and Saud al-Qahtani are to be charged with deliberate killing with monstrous feeling for causing torment. A court made the move after prosecutors argued their case against the duo. The men were described as having helped plan the murder. The United Nations Children's Fund has warned that about 1.5 million children in the Central African Republic are in desperate need of humanitarian aid. UNICEF says that children in the Central African Republic are in danger of being recruited by armed groups are becoming victims of sexual violence. Since the president was overthrown in 2013, the country has been plagued with violence and armed clashes between Christians and Muslim groups.
5 years of armed conflict means that the children are in need of aid in essentially all areas today. They are in need of aid from birth until their early childhood in order to have access to primary health and nutrition care. When they are a little older, they need to go to school. They need to be protected against being recruited by armed groups.
French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe has warned that if an agreement with the Yellow Vest is not reached, the tax on fuel could be scrapped.
The tax on fuel and energy prices have been suspended pending discussion with union representatives, elected officials and citizens. We will aim to identify the most effective ways forward. If we don't apply this tax.
In France, a court has approved the extradition of the brother of the former president of Burkina Faso, Blaise Compaoré, to face prosecution in his home country over the murder of a journalist 20 years ago. François Compaoré is accused of ordering the murder of investigative journalist Norbert Zongo and 3 of his companions whose burnt bodies were found in an abandoned car. At the time of the murder, Zongo was investigating the death of Compaoré's former driver. Young people in Nepal have created a map of the Dead Sea using plastic bags. Their goal is to set a new international record and raise awareness of plastic polluting in the world's ocean. Volunteers tied 100,000 used plastic bags of different colors to a 20-meter-long metal grid shaped like the Dead Sea. The slogan for the record attempted was "One Dead Sea is enough for us." Like this, we've come to the end of this news brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website telesurenglish.net, where you can find opinion articles and special interviews. Thank you for watching. Until next time.